Welcome to Retail Crime Uncovered, your go-to podcast for anything and everything retail crime related, sponsored by Secura Global. Here is your host, Professor Emmeline Taylor.
Welcome to Retail Crime Uncovered. In this week's Spotlight, we'll be looking at policing the retail crime epidemic, and I'll be joined by podcast friend Paul Gerrard from the Co-op and Superintendent Luke Baldock from the Metropolitan Police. Our brand new news correspondent is none other than Sinead Garvan, who you might recognise from Virgin Radio and Talk Radio. Very excited to have her exploring the thorny topics of retail crime. She'll be talking to us this week about wardrobing. And if you're not sure what that is, make sure you stay tuned.
Spotlight.
Police recorded incidents of shop theft surpassed 500,000 for the first time in the last 12 months. This is the highest level on record since comparable records began over 20 years ago. Now, of course, this seems to signal that there's a growing issue with retail crime, but this is of no surprise to retailers themselves. And they say, well, this is still just a drop in the ocean to the real level. So could this increase in reporting actually be a good thing? Could it be signalling that there's growing confidence in the industry in that the police will actually respond? This is coming off the back of 2 iterations of the Police Retail Action Plan, of course, Operation Pegasus or Opal, which is targeting organised criminal gangs in the retail sector, and of course, the commitments made by the government in the Crime and Policing Bill. So I'm joined today by 2 stalwarts of policing retail crime. So Paul Gerrard, friend of the podcast, you will have seen him before from the Co-op, is going to talk about his experiences. And he's joined by Superintendent Luke Baldock from the Metropolitan Police, who's developed a new Operation Kelleher, to target those high harm, high risk offenders and really drive down crime.
Spotlight.
So I'm joined now by Paul Gerrard. He's the campaign's Public Affairs and Policy Director at the Co-op, and Superintendent Luke Baldock from the Metropolitan Police. Hi, welcome to Retail Crime Uncovered.
Good afternoon. Afternoon.
In the introduction, I talked about the increase in shop thefts recorded by the police, surpassing 500,000 for the first time or since comparable records began. What's going on, do you think? Is this a increase in confidence in policing? So actually not more theft is happening, but just more's being reported? Or are we still seeing that ever-increasing shoplifting epidemic? Paul, I think I'll start with you. What are we seeing in the Co-op stores?
So look, I think what's absolutely true is that retail crime is at the highest level it's ever been. I think that's true. I think we saw a huge rise in 2023. I think it was 44% in the Co-op. And alongside that, we saw huge rises in violence and in abuse. And that hasn't declined. It hasn't accelerated at anything like that pace. It's been flattish for the last 18 months. So I think the first thing is crime is absolutely at an all-time high. What I would say, and I think this then begins to talk to your point about confidence, is that what we've seen in the last 18 months is levels of violence decline quite markedly. And we've seen, and I think what goes alongside that is that the police response that we are getting in relation to violence attacks is significantly different. So just to give you a flavour of that, if I can, and I think this comes down to the Retail Crime Action Plan. Before October 2023, when the Retail Crime Action Plan was published, the police only turned up 1 time out of 5 where our undercover teams had detained an offender. So our undercover teams, our security teams, had been not operating store, they've detained the offender, called police for sport, they turn up 1 time out of 5. Now they're turning up 70% of times.
Wow, it's a big jump.
It's a huge difference. And of course, one of the things they're turning up for it much more is violence against my colleagues. So crime's still very, very high, but there is undoubtedly a different response, and there is undoubtedly, I think, a growing, and we'd want it to grow more, but a growing confidence in the view of the police of retail crime and what they're going to do about it.
Yeah, and there has been a lot of action, hasn't there? So there's been the action plan that you mentioned. There's a commitment within that the police will attend if there's violence, if it's a prolific offender, or if that individual is being detained. And so that's where you are seeing the changes.
Yeah, we absolutely are. It's not consistent. There are some forces that are better than others, and there's some forces that have been there for a while, and some forces that are moving towards it. But I think what I hear, and I've been talking about this with you, Emmeline, for almost eight years now, is what I see is absolutely a different reality on the ground in terms of police response. But I see a very different attitude from police officers at all levels to what retail crime is, and the need to tackle it, because the damage it does to not just to shop workers and shops, but to the communities which they serve.
Yeah, definitely. And I think when those conversations started, I think I sensed a lot of defensiveness as well. The retailers are blaming the police are blaming the retailers for not having adequate security. I think those conversations have really moved on now, and it's how can we work together? How can we collaborate? And so, Luke, I'll just bring you in here. So your team are in the Bromley Borough of South London. Mm-hmm. And so can you just tell us a little bit about the profile of the area to begin with, and why you really took on this challenge of tackling retail crime?
Sure. So Bromley is the biggest borough in London by quite some way. It's comes with a lot of kind of geographical, not complexity, but variety. So you've got sort of the north of the borough is very much almost like an inner London kind of profile, whereas out towards the Kent border, you've got farmland and things like that. So you've got inner London at one end of the borough with things like youth violence and things like that, and then out on the border you might have things like saddle theft. So we've got a really complex blend of things that we deal with in Bromley, and obviously the geographical size travelling around. But in terms of retail crime, the reason I became interested in it was obviously I was becoming aware of the narrative and what the retail sector was saying about their concerns about policing and our, let's be honest, lack of grip of the problem that had built up over a number of years. And I absolutely think as police we need to accept that we did kind of drop the ball on this a little bit. But the main thing was we have, where our neighbourhoods, we have community ward panels, which are community meetings where every ward on the borough gets to come and have their say and speak to their local team. And all of them I went to, it wasn't only the retail sector, it was members of the public saying the situation on our high street is completely unacceptable. I'm in the store, they're swearing at the store owners, they're taking what they want, they're completely emboldened, they don't fear the police coming. And it was that point really that brought it all together. And I said, this can't go on. There's got to be something we can do about it. And that's what kicked off the Bromley Retail Crime Group, the working group that we have. And we found absolutely we're pushing on an open door. We had retailers coming along. The co-op very kindly send some of their representatives there who have been incredibly helpful, Matt and Chris, and informing the work and letting us know what it was like quite literally on the shop floor. And that's kicked off a sort of 18-month programme of work that's been really, really interesting to be a part of. Wow,
fantastic. So that working group has now morphed into Operation Kelleher. Can you tell us a little bit about that operation? What are you doing differently that perhaps other forces aren't doing?
Well, I suppose probably some are probably are far ahead of us, as Paul said, but I feel we've come on a really, really good curve of improving our capabilities. What it started with was, one, listening to the problems and understanding what retailers face. Secondly, it was realising that our reporting structures were not doing enough. One classic example I talk about is we had 20 offences in one store committed by one offender that are automated, or our screening process screened to 18 different officers in the case on different teams, on different shifts. So there was no, really, this is one offender in one store. Let's just look at them as one. So what Kelleher did was, it was a local ground up approach. It was my neighbourhood officers going into the stores that we identified were either had the most amount of crime or were reporting the most amount of crime. We didn't really know which, but in a way it didn't matter, because those were the ones that were coming up on our systems the most, of which a few were the co-op, because co-op do have very positive reporting protocols. We then worked with the store managers and went through their systems and said, right, show us who your most prolific offenders are on your systems. And quite often the co-op teams wouldn't they'd know that it was a man in a green jacket. They'd give them a little name on your security system, but they wouldn't know who it was. And they'd say, this guy's done 20 offences. We've got 20 bits of CCTV, 20 statements kind of ready if you want it. And my officers, local officers, well, they'd know exactly who it was. And then what we realised is that we focused on a town called Orpington, which is in the east of Bromley Borough. My teams, they set this all up themselves, and I was really impressed with what they came up with. My frontline cops, sergeants, constables, they identified a cohort in the general area of Orpington and the surrounding suburbs of 13 offenders that they worked out with a bit of a data crunch were committing about 80% of all the retail crime in the stores we were focusing on. And that then meant, well, that's a tangible list of people, right? The co-op and other stores we worked with were willingly giving us the CCTV and the evidential packages we need. And rather than it coming in and going, oh, it was just a bottle of wine, we're going to screen that out, it's not worth pursuing. We're going, hold on, this guy's stolen a bottle of wine or a joint of meat, whatever it was, 20 times. Get that as an evidential package together, put them before the court and say, this person is truly prolific. We were securing prison sentences against people just by aggregating all of those offences together. And then getting things like criminal behaviour orders. We've had conditions on people not to go into any co-op in England and Wales, not to go into any Tesco Sainsbury's within the M25. So thereby, if they come out of prison and commit an offence again, just by stepping foot across the threshold, they're committing a criminal offence and breaching a court order. So that was kind of the Kelleher approach. Look at a small, manageable cohort of people committing a significant majority of offending and just work with them. And that's where we seem to have the success.
You see those big wins, definitely. Yes. And so those 13 offenders, I mean, it's a ratio that I hear time and time again. You know, it's a Pareto principle. 20% will cause 80% of your issues. And in criminology, that's something that we use a lot around offending behaviour. Was there anything typical about their profile? Were they drug affected? Were they stealing to order? Was it for their own use? Or was it a real mix of...
It wasn't a mix. It was anything but. I've heard of we spoke before around the 3 different kind of offenders. You know, you've got your highly organised, sophisticated crime. They're moving people around the country, trafficking people, use of children, often targeting the West End and high-value luxury goods. Then you've got your recidivist, often drug, alcohol-dependent offenders. And then finally, you've got opportunists, thrill seekers. What we found is certainly on Bromley was number 2 was the vast, vast majority of what we were looking at and what we decided to kind of peel off first as a tangible first thing. And that's where we've got the gain. So really, we've done operations now in Orpington. We've done it in Penge, where we had 12 arrests and have got a number of criminal behaviour orders, CBOs. And then also in Beckenham just the other day, where we had, again, 7 arrests, prolific offenders. We only plotted up there a couple of hours and we run out of cops before we knew it. And that was, every single one of them has tested positive for Class A drugs.
Right,
apart from
that's
one,
a real driver.
Apart from one, and that's because they refused to take the test and they were charged with failing to take a drug test in custody. So the overwhelming factor for us were prolific offenders fueled by drug dependencies. And we have a big program of work with our partners at the local authority, the Drug and Alcohol Service. We now work hand in glove. We work with the service providers. Whilst we will enforce the law against people, we are also trying to say, look, there's other ways here. Come and have a meeting with a drug worker, come and have a meeting with an alcohol worker. But it was overwhelming for us. I was sort of prepared for all the 3 different kinds and how we might respond, but it's been so kind of prolific, this bit that we're looking at, that's driven the work for us.
And it's been estimated 70% of retail thefts are driven by somebody with funding a Class A drug habit. And we've had West Midlands Police and the Offender to Rehab initiative mentioned a lot throughout Retail Crime Uncovered. So I think really important tackling those root causes. Paul, I know the Co-op were really supportive as ever for this particular operation. What was the involvement from a business perspective?
So London's got particular problems for us. It's got about 10% of our store estate, but accounts for 6% of our crime. And we've run the approach that says, let's look at prolific offenders. We have done it elsewhere in the country. I don't think we've ever done it in London in this way. I think there's a couple of things. I think the fact that it's an ongoing programme is different. I talked before, I think, about changing attitudes, and I'm going to make Luke blush. It's always quite nice to make a policeman blush. I think from time to time, I think the attitude that Luke and his team have shown have been a real game changer for us. So I think there's lots of examples of where we've worked with the police around prolific offenders. And that's been going on for a number of years. I think from what I understand of Kelleher, and Chris Gunning and Matt Prattley, who work very, very closely with Luke, will tell me this. This is a real sophistication, and I think Luke might come on to doing it, but you'd already mentioned it. It's not just identifying the offenders and tackling them in the moment. It's what you do to stop the reoffending.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's really important. Yes, absolutely. Getting them in front of a court with the aggregation of all those offenders, absolutely. But what are you going to do? Because if we're not careful, we just put people on a hamster wheel. And all that does for my colleagues is give them temporary respite. By working hand in glove, as Luke said, with other agencies, you can begin to tackle the root cause behaviour. And that all fundamentally will make my colleagues safer in the long term, and the communities they serve safer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as you say, nobody wants that revolving door of prison to continue. I recently spoke to an offender who'd been to prison for 37 times, and the idea then the 38th would be the one that they then change their ways without any other intervention. So let's talk a little bit about the findings then. So, Paul, you've mentioned that for the co-op, the incidence of crime was reduced in terms of reporting, and overall reported retail crime went down by a huge 70% in the area. Now, just putting that into context, one store was losing a staggering £7,000 a week in stolen stock, and that dropped down to £400 a week after the operation. So this sounds compelling as a model, the policing, taking out these high harm, prolific offenders, getting them the support that they need, or the prison sentences where that's appropriate. But as a policing model, this sounds expensive. And I know we're in a context of policing don't have the resources. It's absolutely finite what you can do with those resources. This is London. You've got lots of issues, knife crime, drugs, etc. Is this sustainable, or is this a quick fix and then you move on to something else?
That is what I feel is not to be too self-promoting here. The strength of this is delivered by business as usual resources in their business as usual time. There is no special squads here. There's no team of detectives at Charing Cross or something. It'd be lovely if we could get that. But no, the whole point of this is business as usual policing. And this is what I want my teams to come in every day and go, this is part of my job. This is not a special thing that we do anymore. Obviously, at the moment, we're still in a position where we're embedding this as an approach. If you think about the Operation Kelleher, the first phase of it, we're on to about phase 3 or 4 now, it was delivered by 6 officers in total who were based in the wards around Orpington. So it was the place they're based anyway. One thing I did was I gave them just some protected time just for a week to get all the case files and there's a lot of administration, as you can imagine, understandably so. But this was delivered by core teams, core officers during their core shifts, neighbourhood teams, knowing their patch, knowing the people that work on it, really key contacts like store managers, realising that they actually know an awful lot about the community because they see everyone who comes into their stores. And that is the strength of it. There's obviously a cost in that but it's the cost we should have. It's police officers in their day jobs doing their roles. One thing we do have is when we do the operational phase, where we do, in inverted commas, the stakeouts, that is only the sort of the cherry on top of the cake, to be honest. That is just proving when we take them to court, we've caught them in the act. It's a persuasive part of the story that these are committed, prolific offenders. And like I say, catching them in the act has the gravitas, the evidential impact of it.
These stakeouts, they're undercover operations, are they? Waiting for that prolific offender to actually target the store again?
Yeah, so essentially what we do is we know these offenders are prolific. We will often have a list of the top 5 or 10 offenders in that store. When we are ready to go and we've got what we call our cohort of our X number of offenders that we are looking to get into the justice system, we will let co-op know, we'll let the store managers know. We've done it with other stores too. We'll wait in the storeroom and plot up outside. We'll let them go in. The offence will be committed. We'll capture them as they're leaving, and then that is just the evidential kind of, like I say, cherry on top of the cake in court. They've been apprehended by police officers or security in the act, and then they go to custody thinking, oh, here we go again. And then we suddenly go, right, we need to speak to you about 25 offences. And they're like, whoa.
Wow.
So, you know. And
not expecting that.
Yeah. And then the first Kelleher, we had many of them spent time in custody for some months, which is not very usual with retail crime because of the sheer weight of the evidence that we put before the courts.
It's also really important because you've seen a diffusion of benefits when you've tackled retail crime. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So our analysis before we set about this, one of my colleagues, who is a superintendent called Rav Pathania, who's based at Greenwich Borough, we've really worked closely on this, and we constantly share ideas. And it was his work that kind of led to the formation of Operation Kelleher. He did a really, really clever bit of analysis and showed that, for instance, retail crime premises on our boroughs were the third most prominent premises for hate crime and violence against women and girls. So the retail sector, I think it's 65% of employees are women, and thereby it has a disproportionate effect. So in our recent year-end figures on Bromley, I think it was something like 24% reductions in hate crime. And when you think retail crime is the third most prominent, but we haven't done, just to be really clear, the analysis that has really clearly joined them together yet, because it was only the year-end figures. And I'm interested to see if we can do some digging to look at, is the reduction linked to the retail crime work we've done? I think it may well be. We've also seen burglary has gone down for the first time in a while. We've seen certainly the increases in motor vehicle crime have started to be brought down. And so, like you say, these are not homogenous offenders. They don't just go up in the morning and steal from shops. They break into cars, they break into houses. They often tend to be, I don't mean to paint them all as bad people, because there may be drug, alcohol issues that they have, but often will be violent and make comments that make the offences they commit a hate crime. So, yeah, those benefits we found is these are not homogenous offenders, but by using the clearly evidenceable and more easily solvable offence of retail crime, because they commit it on camera, we have benefits elsewhere by targeting those people. Yeah,
definitely. That's what's really exciting, I think, about tackling that. And as you say, you know, polycriminality, these acquisitive criminals, they're not going to say, oh, no, I don't steal handbags. If there's one left there, you know, they will target and move across different crime types. Now, I have to ask, so when we talk about diffusion of benefits, we often then talk about displacement. Are any of your police buddies in neighbouring boroughs thinking, oh, God, what have you done? You've just pushed the criminality our way? Or do you feel you've solved the problem and not having that displacement?
So normally what we find is displacement is always a consideration, of course, that offender will often offend at that store because they know the area, they know who the store manager is and who the shift security person is. They know where there's a venue they can handle, where can pass the goods off. We can maybe come to that in a bit if you like. They know where their local drug dealer is. So if you ban them from a town where they don't live, but they go to do all of their offending, they've got to rebuild all of those networks again. There might be a patch that someone else sees as their shop. You know, there's the territorial thing. And the boroughs around us are all either already were or are adopting this approach. And the Met actually is having quite a big push on this. They want, as part of the government's summer plans thing, to focus on every high street, every town centre. And so all 32 boroughs will be coming up with plans to start adopting this approach all across London.
Yeah, it's such an interesting initiative. Paul, I'll just bring you in here. What are you hoping over this summer of plans in terms of tackling and bringing the high street back to life again, I think is the sort of overarching idea?
I've heard lots of ministers will talk about retail crime as being the canary in the mine of whether they are tackling its Safer Streets or the Safer Streets mission or just crime in general. And I think certainly there was a period not that long ago where at times high streets resembled the Wild West. You know, there was impunity, there was some of the things that my colleagues had to face and tolerate, you know, it's just as part of the job, and it's not part of the job. So I think what I've seen from the police over the last 18 months to 2 years is a real shift in a recognition of the importance of shops and shop workers in communities. I think that's important. I think we've seen in the last 12 months a government that is not just going to talk about it, but going to do things, and the policing and crime bill is a real signal, I think, how important this is. And certainly I was on in a meeting a few weeks ago with Chief Constable Amanda Blakeman, who's got the lead responsibility across the National Police Chiefs Council. And she was really clear, this summer, every police force is going to start to make sure that people understand the importance of high streets and of the police being present on those high streets. And I think what Luke and the team approved in London, which is a tough place to have a shop and a tough place to police, I'm sure, is that you can make a big difference here. A big difference. And that's what I'm hoping, that other forces are going to do the similar kind of thing. I mean, we're both from Manchester. You know, if I think about Manchester, Greater Manchester Police 2 or 3 years ago, it wasn't great. The response rate was really poor. Well, Superintendent Cara Charles has done some amazing things up there, and I've been invited to speak at the start of their summer activity because they're taking it seriously. And I think that's the big difference for me and for all retailers. There are important police officers who are now recognising they can make a difference. And I think the fact that Kelleher is done as part of the day job, because it should be part of the day job, to make sure that people can go about their business, be it running a shop or shopping in a shop, without fear of seeing violence and crime. I think that's a massive step forward. I think, you know, I've done a lot of media over the last few years, and I think
just a little bit,
but I think the police deserve huge credit for this, huge credit, because they have genuinely looked at what they were doing and said, you know what, this isn't quite what's needed. We need to do different things, and they've done it. And it isn't finished, but I think, you know, if you'd said to me the Metropolitan Police would have done Kelleher 3 years ago, I'm not sure I would have thought that would happen. I certainly wouldn't have thought it would not only be done, but on phase 3 and now being replicated across the whole Metropolitan Police Service.
So this is being rolled out across the Metropolitan Police. The same sort of initiative will be taken in all the boroughs?
Absolutely. That is the plans, and I'm part of the team that is trying to help deliver that. So it's part of our summer plans, basically, to really focus on high street crime. So Kelleher, in a way, was the thing that has started this, but it's led on to other things. Obviously, I read in your report that you did with the co-op, Emmeline, that we've got to look at the hand in stolen goods market, because that is where, if there's a ready and open market, the incentive to steal is very easy. And like I said just before we came on, is imagine I'm an offender and I need to buy drugs because I have an addiction. Is I've got to go out and steal something from a shop, right? At that moment in time, that it's worthless because drug dealers don't accept stake as payment, right? So I've got to then go and turn that into cash. That means that nearby, I'm not going to get on a train and travel 10 miles across London to shift a stake. Somewhere on that same high street is going to be buying it. So they've then got to sell that, turn that into cash, and then probably, again, they're not going to travel far. The drug dealer is going to be local. So there's an ecosystem of high street crime with retail at its heart. And so we have now developed Operation Kelleher into what we're calling the 4-stage approach, where stage 1 is Kelleher. You identify your cohort of prolific offenders. And I don't mind speaking about these tactics openly. We're telling people we're going to come and do this, so you can just stop if you want, and we won't bother you. So stage 2 is what is been known as Opzoridon, which everything in the Met's got to have an operation name. Everything's got to have an operation name.
How do you come up with them? Sorry, it's like
I think it's like a randomizer. You put it into machine and it comes up with a random name.
When I was in customs, I got told, you can name this whole operation. So I went Operation Florence after one of the Supremes.
Okay.
And they all look to me a bit odd. Your name sound a bit better.
Yeah, so sometimes it throws up some really, really peculiar ones. But what that does is that utilises the intelligence we gather from stage 1 and works out where these goods are going. We'll then do things like work with partners like the co-op, like other supermarkets, and property mark with DNA marking that's invisible to the human eye, but obviously comes up on a UV scan, and desirable products. And based on the intelligence, we then get a warrant to go through the place we think is handling the stolen goods, and then we incontrovertibly prove that they've got goods from Marks & Spencer or Tesco or Co-op or wherever else it might be in their store. That storekeeper is going to be arrested. We're going to seek to prosecute them for handling stolen goods. Wow. And actually, we'll also bring things like trading standards with us and say, right, have you got any counterfeit goods? And ultimately try and seek to either make them stop or we'll close them down. Stage 3 is, again, utilising the intelligence that we gather, working on who's supplying these guys with drugs. We've already got across Bromley and Croydon, our neighbouring borough, 4 warrants for drug supply. We've arrested 6 people, I think, secured something like 20-odd charges for things like money laundering, drug supply. People are going to court, likely to be in prison for a long time. That's stage 3. And then the final stage is what we call the offender management piece, whereby we're with our partners, with the drug and alcohol workers, local authorities, benefits teams, housing teams, going, how do we support this person to stop offending? And that might be through CBO enforcement. It might be through drug and alcohol diversion programs. So with all 4 of those stages, we seek to go after the entire ecosystem of high street crime fueled by the retail crime. And through that, we think, okay, we've shut down your opportunity to pass off the goods. We've shut down your opportunity to go and buy drugs, and hopefully, therefore, suppress the demand on that. So that is what we're aiming to deliver across the Met and across London this summer. So a lot to do, but we're hoping we'll have some good results.
But fantastic how joined up it all is, how holistic that plan is, instead of just focusing on one very small part of the retail crime journey, I guess. Now, I couldn't have the Metropolitan Police here without bringing up outcomes data. And so in the last financial year nationally, 54%, so just over half of reported shop thefts were closed with no suspects identified. Now, for the Metropolitan Police, this is 78%. Yep. Now, one might imagine that the thefts that are reported are the potentially most violent, the most prolific offenders, or those with solvability factors. We also live in an age saturated with surveillance technology, CCTV, retrospective facial recognition, body-worn cameras, etc. So what's going on? Why are so many cases being closed with no suspect identified? Now, I'm asking you to speak on behalf of the Metropolitan Police, not just Bromley, where I imagine the figures might look different. But what's the issue here?
I think historically, maybe where we haven't got to grips with the issue, we've been kind of overwhelmed by demand, and without a plan, it was just like there was too much to do. And we got ourselves into probably a bit of a tailspin. The thing I can say is from recent, and I can't remember the exact figure, is this reporting year compared to the last, our outcomes charges have gone up drastically. I think I'd have to go and check, but something like over 200%. So you're seeing the Met catching up with that curve. We've realised that there is a problem, and you're now seeing our outcomes and our charges of offenders going up drastically through these measures. We're in a little bit of a tricky phase in terms of analysing it, because obviously we are now driving up reporting through that confidence.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we are. So our list, I think in Bromley, we've trebled our charge rate compared to when we started this operation. In about February, March 2024, we were charging 15, 16 people a month. The last 2 or 3 months, we've charged just on Bromley over 60 people. So it is going in the right direction. We know we've got a lot of ground to take back. But I think at the end of this summer and at the end of this reporting year, you're going to see a very, very different picture. I think we're not to grips with it yet. We're getting to grips with it. And you can already see our charging rate is going up, as I say, very, very drastically.
And Paul, is that something that you're seeing? You've spoken about you're getting more of a response in store when you report something. Are you also seeing some of those outcomes improving, actually taking those prolific offenders or the high harm offenders, you're not seeing them again? Or is there still an ongoing issue?
So look, I think there is a catch-up point, and I think statistics are important, but sometimes statistics are like a lamppost for a drunken man, more for leaning on than illumination. When I speak to colleagues in stores, and I speak to them a lot, my local stores, and people like Chris and Matt will speak to even more, there is definitely a sense that we are seeing the police more. Whether the numbers are quite proving it yet, and certainly we look at the levels of crime that we are seeing, it's not changing hugely. It's not growing anymore, but it's, violence has come down broadly flat. But I think the sense that we get is that the police are turning up and some of the familiar faces are no longer around. Certainly I was in my local store up in Manchester and speaking to the store manager, Joanne, and she was telling me that there was 2 or 3 who have been around for ages and kept coming in, and they've gone. And when the police came in to get some CCTV about something else, she asked them, and she said, "Oh no, they've been locked up." So I think the anecdotal information assessment is that the police are in a very different place. and that's given the confidence, I think, on reporting. I think the numbers will catch up as long as we don't sort of get complacent. And I think the fact that, and you know, I said before that the Metropolitan Police Service has got a real challenge for us because, you know, it's 6% of the crime and it's 9% of the stores. But the fact that they've not just done stage one, as Luke described it, but then they're looking at the whole thing, that's what will change sustainably what the reality is in stores. Just picking people off the street and turn into the criminal justice system, they may or may not get custodial, it doesn't really matter, because they'll come out and have to start and they'll do what they've always done. This isn't doing that. This is trying to stop the problem. And I think that's the bit that I hope we see. So we asked for the police to start turning up. They've turned up. We've asked for the police to start to take action around violence in particular and, you know, detentions, and they have. I think what we need to do next is to begin to see a genuinely holistic approach that says this is about reoffending. How do you stop that a behaviour happening again? Now, there'll be some people say, oh, just lock them up, throw away the key. Well, fine.
And then the burden on the taxpayer
and
for that
there's no data
work,
that says that works.
Yeah.
There are some offences that I will make no apologies. I would like to see those offenders get a custodial. But actually, as long as that custodial has got an opportunity to change the way that person behaves. And I think that's the key. The conversation I would like us all to see having now is that the police are stepping up and doing what we've asked them to do. They'll continue to do more, as Luke has described. That's brilliant. Let's have the conversation now, in a sense, the way Luke and team have developed Kelleher, about how you stop the behaviour happening again. Because that's the key, because that's what will make my colleagues sustainably safe.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been so interesting, Paul. Thank you, Luke. Really fantastic work that you're doing, and I hope that we'll have you both on the show again to further celebrate the successes that are happening in this space. But I think, as you said, Paul, as well, it's not a time for reticence. There's still always going to be that challenge, I think.
Newscast.
I'm so excited for our new presenter to join us from Newscast. If you recognise her voice, that's because she's currently on Talk Sport and Virgin, and she was formerly on BBC Radio 1. Hi, Sinead.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you here. It's brilliant. So we're going to be talking about wardrobing today. Can you just first off just tell us what this actually is?
Yes, so it's something that quite a lot of people are guilty of doing. And I don't think they really realise it's actually fraud. It's where you buy something, you wear it and you return it, and your intention was always to buy, wear and return. So people do it if they want something for a special occasion, but they don't want to spend £200 on a dress. The assumption, I think, for a lot of people is it's a victimless crime.
Yeah.
So it's clothing's the most popular one, then electronics, and then shoes.
Electronics?
Yeah.
Why would you use something for a bit and then, so maybe what sort of items?
It's mostly influencers, people online showing off a new product or whatever, you know, and that's all about maintaining a following and maintaining, you know, their perception and all that kind of stuff. So they will like show off a new thing and then hand it back for content, essentially.
Okay, right. Now, I can remember being a teenager, you know, just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, yesterday.
And I can remember a friend at college distinctly telling me about this, that she'd bought a dress, she'd worn it on an evening out, and then she was washing it, and she was telling me about how you had to wash it in certain laundry powder that didn't smell too strong to get rid of the smoke and the perfume and all of this. And thinking back on that conversation, I remember being quite shocked, but like, oh, that's quite clever.
Yeah.
And I don't think she thought that was actually doing anything wrong. And it was a habitual thing for her. Like, I think she did it every weekend. But that was when you had to go back in person and have that conversation.
Yes.
Where the staff member will be saying like, oh, but there's nothing, where are the tags? You know, that
Why
kind
does
of
it
thing.
smell of cigarettes? Like everything smelled of cigarettes back then, didn't it? Yeah.
But do you think this has got so much worse? Like, you've mentioned influencers, but do you think also now that you can return things online, you don't have to have that awkward situation?
No, exactly.
Do you think that makes a difference?
Absolutely. It's so much easier. And also, most places you can return for free. So it's like, great, try it on, wear it once. You don't really have the problem of smoke anymore.
That's true, yeah.
So most people probably wouldn't even wash it, might just iron it and send it back sort of thing, So, yeah, definitely I do. But that's obviously a way that some retailers can clamp down on it if they wanted to. You have to go back to the shop in order to, so they can inspect it. But, like massive like online retailers like ASOS and all of those, like, if you're a premium member, you just get it, send it back, get it, send it back,
I wondered if one of the ways to maybe combat this, and you see sort of quite a lot of stores using, you can rent dresses now. So if you do have a big wedding coming up, I'm guilty of having things in my wardrobe that I've literally worn once. I've paid quite a lot of money for it. You don't want to wear it again because you think, all the photos are going to be the same. So maybe renting, do you think that's a way of...
It is. There's some great renting websites as well. I've actually used them for various events and it's great, But I think people aren't just doing it for the special occasions. I was speaking to someone earlier talking about this and they're like, oh yeah, I do that all the time sort of thing. But you talk about, people thinking it's not really a crime or like, it's not that bad. Big company, they make lots of money. But actually, the latest figures we have on this from Retail Economics, they say UK retailers are losing £1.3 billion every year to returns fraud. So it costs them on a number of fronts. The process of the return, which is often free for the customer. The loss of the sale. Then there can be problems reselling. So it might be just on the turn of the season, okay? So you've bought a coat and you've, sent it back within the month or the 28 days. But actually people don't want a coat now because, we've had a couple of sunny days, that sort of thing. Then they have to discount it. So they lose on quite a number of fronts. And also the... British Retail Consortium, they have flagged fraudulent returns as a key concern for the industry.
Oh my gosh, it's obviously getting so much worse then, isn't it? I wonder if it's a little bit like self-service checkouts and that, people just don't think, they think they're sort of gaming a system, they're being a bit cheeky, it's a grey area, but it's actually not that big a deal.
No, because there are people at work at these companies that have to get paid, and I'm not talking about the big bosses, the people in the factories who are actually like, doing processing all the returns. But there are things that, retailers can do about this. And I mentioned ASOS earlier. So they have got a problem with like serial returners. So they're monitoring these people and they will now charge £3.95 per return if they feel you're making too many. They'll also suspend your account if they think for a number of reasons, you're making too many complaints about missing items, damaged products.
Oh, because that's another way, isn't it? Saying, well, it never turned up.
Yeah, exactly. And so they monitor it by like, is it way above the average of an average customer? Crucially, that's if they think you're wardrobing. So they have references. So if they think that that's what you're doing, then they'll clamp down on you and suspend your account.
And
so that's one thing. But also requiring people to go back into the shop. Like if you have got a shop, like if it's not just an online service, making people to go in, it's more intimidating.
Oh, definitely. You've got to tell those porcupines to a real person.
Exactly.
Straight face. Yeah, absolutely.
Other things they can do, offer instant returns for customers with very low rate returns. So you get your money back the next day. But if you're someone who does it all the time, then it's going to take like a month. And if it's the money that you're really after, that's quite an incentive. And then also just limiting the amount of returns you make. So, within a 1 year period, you can only return 3 items, say, and then that.
Wow, that's huge. Because I guess, now with e-commerce, the amount of online sales that we have, and we know that people are doing bracketing. So that's where you buy sort of one of everything in every size, colour, and then you might buy 20 items, return 19 of them. It's not illegal, but that's causing a few problems for businesses.
Well, it's the same because you've got how much it costs to like process it and the item coming back, all that. But also it's the carbon footprint that companies are really worried about as well. And they need to offset that. And if they've got vans driving here, there and everywhere, like returning items that actually don't need to be returned because perhaps maybe you shouldn't have got it in the first place. But so with bracketing, people will do it, say, if, they want a pair of shoes. they perhaps have gone into the shop, they don't have a size 6 or a size 7. We're like, okay, well, we've got it online, so then you'll do that and then you'll send back the one. That's kind of like the low level of it.
Yeah.
But there's very much a big trend on social media for try-on hauls. So
I've not heard of this.
So you'll get like someone with quite a big following, and they'll have bought, I don't know, 20 items from Zara or Next or, Marks and Spencer's, wherever. And they'll try them on and they'll get their, followers say, keep it or send it back sort of thing.
Oh, wow.
So in a sense, bracketeering is content.
Yeah.
So it's
I feel like that's a little bit like, so my little boy loves watching YouTube videos of people unwrapping toys.
Yes,
And
yeah.
so I guess it's similar, isn't it?
It
For
is.
adults, it's like, oh, here's this nice new jumper. What do you think?
It's really enjoyable. I mean, I do love watching. I mean, I love like shopping hauls. Like, so, Mrs. Hinch, the world's best cleaner, she goes to like Poundland and B&M and does like these huge, big. I mean, she doesn't take anything back, but I'll just watch her taking out different cleaning product out, and I'm mesmerised.
You literally watch her buying like bleach and dishwasher tablets.
Yeah, she'll bring the bag home and then she'll take the items out one. I love it, but then I also there are some people I watch on social media who'll be like trying on, tops from Marks and Spencer's. Oh, maybe that one doesn't fit, and they're going back. But
this is such an insight into your life, Sinead.
But what's interesting as well is like with the social media influencers, that is a way that perhaps like retailers can kind of monitor what's going on. If they're sending something back, but then they can see that you've been wearing it for a shoot or a night out on your social media.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
And red-handed.
Exactly. And that's for the serial returners, the ones who are really causing them sort of a financial headache.
Because I've seen some retailers are now adding tags in, really sort of prominent places on clothes. And then as soon as the tag is removed, then obviously you can't return it.
Yeah.
Maybe you could get an exchange, but there's going to be a conversation as to why that tag has been removed. So maybe that's one way, but I still think influencers might be able to get around that in a way, change the angle perhaps. Or I remember when with some tags, it became cool to be wearing an item where it's got a big hole in it where the tag used to be, and you'd wear it out looking like you're really cool that you stole it.
They used to put ink in like little things on that, and so then if you tried to take them off, it would just like destroy the item. But tags in prominent places is definitely like a new way of trying to deal with it, because if it's just at the back and you can hide
Tuck it in.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, half the time, even if you don't want to send it back, you might still have it on the first time you wear it. So yeah.
That's true. Brilliant. So interesting. Thanks, Sinead.
Thanks.
Newscast.
Wow, so many interesting insights there on how to police retail crime and really make a difference. Next episode, I'll be joined by Steve Teetham from Next and Stefan Hale from Through Vision, and I'll be talking to Sinead about the growing trend of the theft of toys, including jelly cats. I'll see you then.